so good to have you on this session. And I'm just really excited to learn about your leadership journey and the factors that contributed to making you such an amazing, amazing human being and a phenomenal leader. One thing I'll say is that everyone that knows you, that has walked with you, whenever I have a chat with them, they always say, you know what, if I had the opportunity, I'd love to work with Mona again. So I'd like to, at some point through the conversation, dive into how you started your journey as a leader and just learn more about some of the values that make you who you are. So, Mona, it is so great to have you here. So, welcome.
Thank you so much, Jumi. I'm honored to have this opportunity and thank you so much for thinking of me. From one leader to another, I mean, you've been an amazing leader as well, so let's not forget that, but very happy to be here.
By the way, I just realized that we're kind of twinning. You have cream, I have cream.
Well, when are we not twinning? We're always usually on the same wavelength, Jumi.
Yeah. You know what they say about great minds.
Exactly.
All right, so let's dive into it. So, when you think about leadership, what does leadership mean to you, and how did you start your journey into leadership? What informed your leadership approach? And were there individuals that inspired you or inspired the type of leadership style you emulate?
Absolutely. Honestly, I never wanted to manage people. I never did. I was always the individual contributor. I was like, you know what? It's too much to be responsible for other people's futures and their deliverables. And I was young in my career. And I said, I just want to focus on getting things done and do it right and move on. At that time, it was you had two paths. You either went the managerial route or you went the individual contributor route. And in order to move up, you had to have a little bit of both, but specifically for the managerial route. And I was put into the managerial route, even though I didn't really want to be there. And it ended up just kind of cultivating. And at first, I was like, okay, I have somebody else relying on me and depending on me. Like, what do I do? And this is where really the interesting part came into play because my manager at the time, and one of your questions was, who are the leaders that have influenced you and help you become who you are? Not all of them have been great, as I'm sure everybody has that. And we end up becoming the sum of our parts, right? So the parts that I took were from leaders that were not so great. I knew exactly what I didn't want to do. And I didn't want to send that back down. But then there were also those that may not have been my direct supervisors and direct leaders, but I would notice their styles. And this is going back about 10 years or so, and just notice how they would support their teams and support their people. And I want to be on that team. I want to have that kind of support. And when I started to see that, I was like, okay, maybe that's where I would like to go. But the thing is, I truly didn't realize the value of leadership up until my last role. And you can definitely relate to that, Jimmy, because we were in it together, right? But when you have such amazing people, not only you have their back, but they have yours, and they are willing to go that extra mile and they're willing to do whatever you need them to do. You want to be 110% present. You want to be 100% supportive, and you see them grow. To watch somebody else take that ownership and lead and get the limelight, it was like a turning point for me because I'm like, wait, I'm not the one who should be getting the credit here. This is now the time for the next generation and for the next group of people who are still rising and still getting there. I want to help them. And that's where I really found the most value, especially from the last role that I had was amazing.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Mona. What I find inspiring is the fact that you did not want to be a people leader and you just somewhat got forced into that role. And you were fortunate enough to be surrounded by leaders who pretty much could somewhat serve as a role model for you to figure out what works, what doesn't work, and you're able to adapt and learn from that, right? So that also speaks a lot about you and the fact that you're able to translate what you learned into actually living it out and impacting your leadership approach and style to lifting others up, making them shine. Not every leader will do that. So I commend you for learning the good, because you could have learned the not so great aspect or not so great approach to leading, right? You could have done that. But
I did. To be honest, and this is 100%
Mhm.
honesty, the first time I became a manager, I was not very good. And I will be the first one to admit it. And it was because I had never been a leader before. And I was taking guidance from another toxic leader that I had at the time. And I thought this is how it's supposed to be done. I didn't know any better. So I ended up leading my team the way that I was being led. And I know how I felt. I felt horrible. I felt like I was being micromanaged. I felt like it was such a toxic environment. But I thought that's how it was supposed to be until I realized I don't want to feel like this anymore. What makes me think that my team wants to feel like this? So no, we're going to stop this. But it took time. I'm not going to lie. It took time to get there because you know what they say, you don't really remember what people say, but you remember how they make you feel. I know how I felt, and I would never ever want to put that on other people ever again.
Thank you for sharing that, Mona. So, what I hear clearly is this: be the type of leader you want to have, right? And sometimes it takes making mistakes, it takes you to be self aware enough, right? And have the level of emotional intelligence to be able to know that this isn't working and be willing to unlearn and relearn the right approach. That's very impactful. Thank you for sharing that. So, what would you say are your core values, the core values that guide your leadership decisions? When I think about you, I think I've seen you work with your teams, lead them with a level of excellence that is unbelievable. But then you also have a level of empathy that is also amazing. So, how are you able to balance empathy with making your teams accountable, holding them to a higher standard, and also what core values guide how you make decisions as a leader?
Very good question. So, for the core values, this won't come as a surprise to you: authenticity, integrity, and efficiency, I would have to say. So, yes, I'm all about we get things done very quickly, we get them done right, we doing the right thing. But I know, and it goes back again to my own human experience when I was basically killing myself to get the job done, and nobody stopped and said, "Hey, are you okay?" Because I have been there, that makes me hyper aware of when my team is going through a very strenuous time. Deadlines are approaching, we have all these things that we have to get done, and it's like you have to stop and say, are you okay? Are you able to handle this? If you're not, I need you to speak up. And the biggest thing that I have found, and this is the feedback that I got back from my team, was that I raised my hand as a leader and I said, I need to take a step back. And because I said that, it gave them permission to do the same. This is something that I noticed even recently over the last couple of years, is that you want to be that example that you want your team to be living. You want to be that example for them, because the second I would say, listen, I think you need a day off, and now I'm going to force you to take a day off. And it was like, well, no, I'm not weak. I don't need to take a day off. I'm good. I can handle this. And I could see that they could not handle this. Right. And I would force them, like, no, this is not up for negotiation. You're going to take the day. And it took about a year and a half. But then this individual finally said, I know what you mean now. And thank you for saying that, because I saw you take a mental health day. I know that it's okay to do that. Because I gave them this much, they gave me this much. It was, you don't need a lot to show your appreciation for your team, but you have to recognize that they are also human too. We are all in the same boat. We are all in one team. And if you can't do it, hey, let me roll up my sleeves and I'm going to help you do it, because we're all working towards a common goal. And that's one of the things that I think a lot of times is forgotten in leadership, where it's usually, here's your directive, now go do it and come back. I don't believe in that. I believe in Let's figure this out together. And I know you're the same way. You're exactly the same way, Jimmy. And this is why we mesh so well. Is that let's figure this out together, because if one of us fails, we fail as a team. And I'm not going to just sit there and say, here's your directive, go finish it, and then come back. If you can't finish one piece, we're going to do it together, and keep me informed. And let's have working sessions and brainstorming sessions so we're all in it throughout the journey together.
So, Mona, when you think about leading, you just highlighted the fact that it's important to have empathy for your team and be able to let them know that it's okay to take a break, because in recharging, you're energized and you have the mind space to be effective or more effective. And they see you take time off and disconnect. So you're somewhat setting the example. So, one question I'd like to ask you is, as you interact with your team and engage with your team, you're not necessarily coming off as the superhuman person that has superhuman strength, knows it all, doesn't ever get stressed or overwhelmed. How have you, as a leader, been able to balance being vulnerable with your team? Because we hear a lot about it's okay to be vulnerable, coming from a world where a leader has to show that they're strong all the time, to creating that room for authenticity and vulnerability while still showing strength, especially as a woman. How have you been able to manage that?
You are touching a very core part of my soul right now. So, I have been a huge advocate of showing that vulnerability. And I actually now start off anytime I have a new team or new team member, I always laid this groundwork to say that vulnerability is not a weakness, it is a strength in my eyes. And whatever you may have experienced in the past, please leave it there, because here is a safe space, because we are all human and we're all going to go through these emotions. Now, especially being a woman, and I'll tell you a quick story. This was many, many years back, and there was an initiative that I was working on while I was in another country. I was working in London, and this was blood, sweat, and tears. When I tell you this was blood, sweat, and tears, it was insane, right? So 6 to 8 months of 7 days a week, the whole thing, fine. So finally, when the objective was achieved, it was a huge deal. And I was basically told that, oh, no, this wasn't good enough. And I'm like, how is this? What else? And I even asked, I said, what else could I have done? And they said, well, nothing. You did everything. They could not give me a straight answer, basically. At that point, the way that it was delivered to me and the message itself and all the stress that I had been under at that time just came rushing out. And I started to cry, because when you've been pulled through the ringer and you've gone through no sleep, no eating, like your stress level is already very high, right? Well, it came down to promotion time. And I was basically told that I was not getting a promotion because I was too emotional. And it was because of that one moment that I had shown my vulnerability, and I couldn't control my emotion at the time because of everything. And I knew exactly where it was coming from. So I took that as such a learning experience for myself, and trying to help and empower other women, especially in technology, but also in overall corporate. We are always so afraid to show that emotion, to show, oh, well, you're not allowed to cry. You're not allowed to do that. You have to be strong. No, because we are not going to be a different person in the office, and we're not going to be a different person at home. I should be able to be my authentic self in the office or at home. If I'm going to build that trust with you, I have to be authentic. And I want the same from my team and my coworkers. Show me your authentic self. And if that means you have to break down, break down. It's a safe space.
That's a powerful example, and thank you for being vulnerable enough to share that story. That was really powerful. So I'll pivot to a couple more questions. So just we just talked about being vulnerable, and when you think about leadership, it's not an easy job, because you do have to make lots of decisions with limited information. You're responsible for people, right? Leadership is about taking care of the people in your care, not lording it over them, but taking care of them. If you don't care about the people in your care, you don't have any business being a leader. So, as a leader, being in a position where you are carrying a lot of burden and weight of your people, your organization, looking out for their best interests, looking to ensure that you have your deliverables met amidst tight deadlines, limited resources, and all of that. How do you ensure that you stay grounded?
That's a good question. Staying grounded and meeting deliverables. So I'm going to start with another little anecdote initially, and because this basically molded my leadership style as well. There was a time not too long ago, I'd probably say about 8, 10 years ago, I was in a role where I had been given a deliverable and a date that I had to meet, and failure was not an option. Failure is just never an option, right? So I did whatever I had to do to get it done. And I did that. At the same time, my health was suffering, my family life was suffering, my mental health was suffering. And I raised my hand and said, I can't do this. I need some help. And it just fell on deaf ears. And nothing really got heard until I gave my resignation. I said, I can no longer do this because you want me to do this all over again and meet this deliverable and meet this deadline. And I just cannot do this without any help. I've been saying I need help, but you haven't listened. And the response that I got from a very senior leader at that time was, well, nothing failed and nothing fell through the cracks. So if you did it before, you can do it again. And that's when I knew I was making the right decision by leaving. So I left, but then I took that. And now every single team that I lead ever since then, I actually encourage this. If they are sacrificing their time, their family life, their health, like, no, you need to let it fail. And I've never said that before. Never. This has been a very hard thing for me to say and to do. But that was a huge learning lesson. You have to let things fail sometimes. If you are going to kill yourself to get something done, that message will never actually be received that you are hoping to get. You can scream until the cows come home, and it's never going to be received. So sometimes failure is actually a really good thing.
I'll piggyback on that a little bit just to make this land, because that's something I've struggled with. Because I got the same advice from someone saying, let it drop, let it fail, because you've communicated that you need help. This is not going to work without additional funding, resources, and all of that. Let it drop. But when I think about it as a woman, a Black woman, they expect you to fail.
Mhm.
So I'm in a bind. If it fails, yes, we knew you couldn't do it. That'll be the outcome or the response. If it doesn't fail, you are putting yourself through the ringer and going above and beyond. So, do you have any guidance on how to manage and balance that in a way that will actually send the message home without it coming back to bite you?
Yes. And I'll tell you why. This is why I am in governance, right? So it's all about risk versus reward. It's your threats and vulnerabilities, right? You're going to do the work, you're going to put it in logical terms, and you're going to make it an objective decision, and you're going to back it up with facts. So, anytime that I have been in this situation, you're 100% correct, by the way. We as women are held to a much, much higher standard where failure sometimes is just looked upon as, oh, well, we knew you couldn't do it. And I get it. Trust me, I get it, which is why when I've been in the situation now since that incident that I just mentioned to you, I have now stated this, I back it up with numbers. In order for me to accomplish what you are expecting me to accomplish, I need A, B, and C. And A, B, and C is dependent on X, Y, and Z. These are the budgetary constraints. These are the resource constraints. This is the time constraints. This is in reality what I can deliver. I will try to do more, but if I do not, I will need help in these areas. At that point, it becomes a factual conversation. No longer, oh, I'm going to push myself to get this done. And sometimes you're right. We don't have that choice. It has to get done. But you have a choice of saying what you can and cannot do in the time frame that you can and cannot do it. We have to be better at this, and it's still a struggle every single day for us, especially as women. to make that call and to be vocal. And I think being vocal is the hardest part, especially when you're in a room full of men that are very vocal and they feel very confident. They can say, you don't always have that confidence, right? You don't always feel like you can speak up and say your mind. And especially when you're saying, oh, by the way, I may not be able to do this. And they're all like, ah, well, we kind of knew that was going to be the case. No, but if you come to the table with a level head, an even tone, which I learned from you, Jimmy, but you come to the table with facts and you document, document, document. There is no way somebody can go back and say, well, you didn't tell me this and we expected X, Y, and Z. Well, your expectations were off. I don't know why. I don't know if that answers your question. And
That was amazing and spot on. So you definitely make sure you document, and where applicable, governance is your friend. So definitely, I agree with you 100%. So in building teams, you don't always have the opportunity to select those on your team. A lot of times you inherit people that are on your team. Can you share from your perspective and your experience how you ensure that you are able to define the type of culture you want to see on your team, and also be able to bring out the creative genius, bring out the potential in your team? How do you ensure that you have the right people on the team, living and breathing the culture you want to see? So, how do you manage culture within your organization, and how do you drive innovation and just bringing out the best in your teams?
that is a fantastic question. Fantastic question. The way that I've done this in the past, especially recently, as I've gotten more individuals that maybe inherited in different organizations, my first question to them is always, what is your passion? Where do you, not, it's not like, oh, where do you see yourself in 5 years? What drives that excitement for you in your work or outside of work that brings out that light, that brings out that fire? Because when you have that and you're doing something that aligns with that, you're going to do the best that you possibly can. But if you're doing something that, oh, well, my passion is really incident response, and I want to get involved in forensics, and I want to be in the dirt and in the grind of figuring out like who the threat actors are and whatever. But okay, so our job is policy governance, and you're not going to have that. But how about if you take all of those policies and procedures that we need from the security incident response or related to that? That way you get to delve into that area. But you're also doing the job that we need you to do. It's a very fine line. Sometimes you can do that, sometimes you cannot. And there are times where you cannot, and there is no bridge to that passion versus what they're doing and what they're bringing to the table. I end up having a very honest conversation. And that honest conversation has nothing to do with their performance. It has everything to do with if they are happy or not. And I switch the conversation to, I can see that you're not happy doing what you're doing. A, is there something personal going on that may be preventing you from bringing your best self to work? Or B, if you're just not happy doing this role, let me help you in finding the role that is best for you. Because if this is not a match, you're not helping me and I'm not helping you either. It has to be a match. So sometimes it's really, I'm just biding my time and I'm going to do the best that I can. Okay. Well, sometimes you don't have that luxury to say, well, maybe we can help you go into another position. And they're basically telling you, no, I'm fine. Everything is fine. Everything is good. At that point, it becomes a little bit more of a difficult conversation, right? And that's where you start to go back to my governance piece, and it's very fact based. Okay, well, if there isn't a problem, here's what the expectation was for this last deliverable. We didn't really get this, but now you tell me, what can we do to get you there? It's really just having that open line of communication. And what I have found, Jimmy, is even if they won't say it, it may be this unsaid thing that I'm not going to say I'm not happy, because that's going to be reflecting negatively on my performance review and I can't really be honest. Eventually, it always comes out. Always. And they end up finding the role, or I end up saying, oh, oh, you know what? This role kind of came my way in case you were interested. It may not happen overnight, but eventually it always happens because people don't want to do things that don't make them happy. Why would they?
So, what I hear you say is you get to know your people. And when you know your people, you're able to somewhat guide and help them to find where they will be their best self and be able to contribute meaningfully because it's an area they're passionate about. And well, that's great. As a leader, your job is not to constrain people and keep them from
Yep.
moving and growing and spreading their wings and flying off, right? You want to make sure that they see a future, even if it's not on your team, but they know that you have their back, they have your support to make sure that they're growing as individuals and as professionals. So, talking about culture, how do you ensure that culture is aligned with what you expect within your team?
Well, I mean, it goes back to living that principle and living that example, right? So if you don't show them, like for instance, I have my team meetings every week, right? So I have the entire team. And when we start off, we don't start off with, okay, so let's go through what we're working on this week. Let's go through. No, how was your weekend? Hey, how's your family? What did you do? Anything interesting? And then now I know what is happening in each of their lives and what's important to them outside of work. The culture comes from living your culture and living your beliefs. I don't want to set the tone just because even if my leadership says, "Oh, well, this needs to be done and the culture may be different," I have the leeway to change that within my team. I may not be able to influence the entire culture of the firm or the organization, but at least I can do that in my circle and basically say, "This is okay here." I have found that a lot of times the overarching culture takes hold, and that sometimes is very difficult to break. And at this point, I have learned if the organization's culture does not align with your culture, you're not in the right position.
You know, they say culture eats strategy for lunch,
Yes.
right? So you can have the best roadmap, strategy, best intentions of these are all the things we're going to accomplish. But if you don't have the right culture in place, you're most likely not going to be very successful in executing and accomplishing whatever goals or strategy you set. So investing time in the culture really helps you to drive, the value you want to see at the end of the day for the organization. So, when you think about leading, what is your approach to leading in times of uncertainty and ensuring that you have the right clarity to make the right decision? Because as a leader, there's certain times where you don't always have the full picture of what the future holds, right? But as a leader, you're expected to guide your team through uncertainty. You're expected to kind of steady, the waters as much as possible. What approach do you take to ensuring that in times of uncertainty, you're able to bring some level of clarity to your team?
That's a very good question as well. I am a firm believer honesty is the best policy, right? I would think that if you withhold the truth or sugarcoat things that are very important and near and dear to your team and individuals, you're only doing them a disservice as well as yourself. It's very hard to deliver difficult messages, but there is that tact that, and I don't know if this is a learned behavior or not, to be very honest. I don't know if this is something that either comes innately or it is just something that in a textbook, if you read that you can practice and practice and practice, because every situation is going to be different. And the way that I have dealt with this in the past is A, being very honest and posing the questions back to the team. How does this make you feel? And is there anything that I can help you with in getting through this? And is there any other questions that maybe I can help answer? I may not have all of the answers, but I may have some. And if I don't, maybe we can find you somebody who does. But in that time of uncertainty, yes, you have to keep that level head. You have to keep it factual yet again, but also with compassion, because you don't know how it's going to be taken. With every individual is going to be different, and even though they're putting on this brave face and yes, everything is fine and whatever, they may not be. They may not be. So again, it also goes back to showing your vulnerability. It's okay to show your vulnerability, but to your point, you still have to be that strong leader, right? So showing your vulnerability by saying, listen, I'm a little afraid about what's happening too, but I'm confident that we are still going to get through this together and we'll figure this out as it goes. But at the same time, there are things that you are concerned about that you may not know the answers to. Let's talk about it. It's not an easy discussion. And look who I'm talking to. You are the queen of this, right? So you know exactly how this goes, but this is how I have typically handled it, and I will probably continue to handle it. But if you have any guidance for me, Jimmy, I'd be happy to take it.
So, Mona, I think what you said is spot on because I believe that to your point, transparency breeds trust. Even when there's uncertainty, like you rightly said, and you're transparent with your team and you show your vulnerability and you tell them, this is what I know, I don't have all the answers, we'll figure it out together, folks are going to stick with you through that challenge, through that uncertainty, because they trust you and they know that you're looking out for them, right? So everything you said, I agree with 100%. So this has been honestly a very enlightening conversation. So thank you for sharing your experience, your insights. And as you think about leading, I know that you, as best as you can, you always lift others up. Are there any frameworks, any tools that you've used historically that you'd recommend to leaders out there, upcoming leaders, that would be a great resource for them on leading? Also, just based on everything you've said, leadership is something that can be learned. You don't just show up and you're just this amazing leader. It takes intentionality to want to be a better leader. So, are there any tools that you have, any frameworks that have helped you?
There is one, and I've used this in the past, is acting. And the reason why I say that is you're not pretending to be somebody that you're not. That's not what acting is, right? So when I took community theater, it was about breaking down the most sensitive and most vulnerable aspects of who you are to your audience, and being able to still get your message across to your audience in a clear, concise way where you're being heard, you're being understood, and you're being taken seriously. That is something that I have not found any school or organization or anything to be able to teach. When you walk into a room, to be able to command that presence just by feeling that you belong there and being able to exuberate that energy to say, okay, I have something to say. When you are confident, your team is confident because they have a leader that knows what they're doing, that can actually communicate on their behalf when they struggle, and can fight on their behalf because they will be heard. If you have somebody who is not a good communicator, who is not able to portray that level of confidence, people aren't going to take them seriously. How are you going to fight for your team if you can't fight for yourself? So, to build that confidence, it's a whole circle. It's not just one thing. So, I can't say there are any frameworks that I have followed. My experience has been my biggest framework. But if there was something that I would recommend to others, it is, believe it or not, theater, acting, and being able to figure out who you really are and being able to bring that out in an instant.
Wow. Okay. So now I think I have my matching orders. Go sign up for theater or acting classes. I don't know if I'll survive, but maybe I'll learn a thing or two about being present,
You
communicating,
can do
and
it, Jimmy.
you
They
know,
actually have this for corporate organizations.
nice.
One of my organizations did it. It was called executive presence, and it was exactly what I learned in theater. And that executive presence was walking around and being filmed and people criticizing you as you do a presentation of what you're doing right versus what you're doing wrong. And it's a lot. It is very emotionally draining, but corporations have done that. I don't know if that's still around, but I'm sure that there are others that are very similar to that.
A couple more questions for you. When you think about the impact you've made or the impact you'd like to continue to make, what would you hope that your leadership legacy would be?
Oh, wow. My leadership legacy, I truly think that it goes down to the same principles. And we're coming full circle. So, your full circle is, what are the values that you bring and the values that you want to instill in your team? I would hope that because I'm trying and striving to be my best at living those values, that they take that and apply that not just in their professional life going forward, not only to the teams that they will end up managing someday, but also to their personal lives, because you can't just be authentic at work and not be authentic at home. It goes all around. You can't be good at project management at work and not be good at project management at home. It's a skill. You end up thinking that way. So if there's anything that I would say that I really hope to leave that legacy, would be that Mona helped me to understand, A, it's okay to be vulnerable. B, my authentic self is good enough. And C, hopefully I can bring out the best in them that they weren't able to see just by having those conversations, allowing that open conversation and safe space, and honestly testing them. I give stretch projects, just go figure it out. And I don't want to be telling you how to do this. Here's the end result. Please go figure it out and let's see. And this is when they realize, oh my God, I didn't know I could do this. Oh my God. So if there's those three things, I that last one is really, I hope that I can help unlock your own potential that you couldn't see for yourself.
Amazing. So earlier on, you said that people may forget what you say, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. So, how do you want people to feel after working with you?
That's a tough question. I want them to feel like, hey, we got something done, but we had a blast doing it. That's what I want to leave, because work is always going to be work, right? And you have to make the most of every situation. Why not make it fun? Why not? And even if it's just a little thing like we used to do in our previous days, have a virtual happy hour, or we're going to do a brainstorming session, but everybody's going to bring something fun to the table. You can still get your deliverables, you can still get that done, but have a smile on your face while you do it. And
Yeah,
everyone will be happy to bring that to the table.
get your work done and feel
Yeah.
great and amazing after, right? That's a good one. So, final question. What advice would you give to the next generation of leaders?
I would say, if you're going to be a good leader, always come to the table with trust. Trust your team until they prove to you otherwise, basically. I have found that not having that trust leads to micromanaging, unmet deliverables, disrespect. You just trust initially, right? Even if you've never worked with them, trust them. I'm going to trust you that you're going to do the great thing. And if they come back with something fantastic, okay, I have no reason to never trust you again. But if they come back with something else, you know, okay, well, I'm going to have to watch myself again. But trust your team, believe in them as much as you believe in yourself. And if you don't believe in yourself, that's something you need to work on, because you cannot believe in a team without believing in yourself first, because you are the face upwards. You are the one protecting them against everything else that is coming down upon you, so that they can bring their best selves to work every day and do the best job that they possibly can. You're molding them. So create that trust. Make sure that you clear those obstacles and clear those pathways and be there for them.
Wow, wow. So, this is an amazing way to wrap. And it is start with trust, right? Because trust builds confidence, motivation, and you get the best out of your teams if you just trust them. Thank you so much, Mona. It's been such a pleasure having you, having this conversation, and the great insights you've shared, your experience. I'm sure that anyone that watches this will glean a lot from your wisdom. So thank you for making the time. It has been a fun conversation.
I can't thank you enough. Thank you so much for having me here. I value our friendship. I value our time. I value everything. So thank you so much for having me.
It's been a pleasure, Mona.